We're going to be in Matthew this morning, like we have been, and continuing this place in the narrative of Matthew where Jesus he's taught the crowds, and he's talked to Pharisees, and he's welcomed sinners and tax collectors, and he's been in conversation with lots of different people. But here it's in this section for a few chapters where he's going to really unpack what it means to be the Messiah, and he's going to do so in a private way with his disciples, with his apostles, and very, very bluntly. Like, he's not going to speak in parables, but he's going to speak openly about what's going on. And so this section follows the revealing of Jesus to his apostles as being the Messiah, being this one who they would understand as the King of the Jews. The Messiah means the anointed one. This language comes from the Psalms and from Samuel, where David is anointed and Saul is anointed. It comes from this idea of the anointed king of Israel. And what developed over time was this idea of an anointed one, a Messiah that would be the ultimate anointed one, and he's going to be the ultimate king of David. And so he's revealed himself to God, well, at least through God, this idea that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, which is this confession Peter makes. And he says, my Father has revealed this to you. Now they know, and now he wants to unpack, what does this mean? How does the Messiah operate in the world? What does his kingdom look like in the world? And we got a whole lot of that teaching when we went through like the Sermon on the Mount. But here he's really digging in deeper to this idea of what a Messiah lives like in the world. What do people that follow him live like in the world? And so just a tiny bit of review of what's been going on in Matthew, right? We have this idea of, in the Greek, it's Christ, Jesus Christ, right? The Christ, or Messiah in the Hebrew, this idea of Son of God. All these are Old Testament terms that point to the Davidic king. And when we think of king, like, this is what he's revealing himself to Israel as this king. And when we think of king, what do you think of? Like, just generically, like, if you think of king, I think of like someone that has sovereignty. Like, they have ultimate authority, ultimate sovereignty and authority, the one who rules and has power. Ezekiel prophesied, I'll read this, he says, my servant David, he says, one day my servant David shall be king over them, and they shall all have one shepherd. David, my servant, shall be their prince forever, and I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it will be an everlasting covenant with them. And so this is a major theme in Matthew of Jesus is this one that's prophesied, this son of David, this king, the sovereign one who has ultimate authority, ultimate power. Matthew's audience already knows this. If you're reading Matthew, you know ahead of time who Jesus is versus when the disciples and the apostles find out, because we get to read his baptism story, right, where he's baptized, and it says that a voice comes from heaven and says, this is my one dear son in whom I take great delight. And so, right, the Davidic kings were considered son of gods. Like, if you read the Psalms, they're the sons of God. Yet there was going to be this ultimate son, this unique son, this one-of-a-kind son who is going to be the one-of-a-kind Messiah. And God says, this is him. And now we know that the apostles know it as well, as I just quoted a second ago, when Peter quotes and says, or Peter, from this revelation from the Father, he says that you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And so Matthew's audience knows, the apostles know, and he's going to begin teaching. He is the king, the one with authority. Turn with me in Matthew 17. Or actually, we'll just go to 16 first. Go to 16 first. While you're turning to Matthew 16, what do the prophets say about the extent of his authority? So, this is the Messiah, son of David. This is the Jewish king, if you will, the king of Israel. But what do the prophets say where do they say his authority will extend? How great will his authority be? Well, this is from Psalm 2. It says, the king says, I will announce the Lord's decree. He said to me, you are my son. This very day I've become your father. He said, ask of me, and I will give you the nations as your inheritance, the nations, and the ends of the earth as your personal property. So the prophets, right, while they talk about maybe this one that's a son of David or this king of Israel or a king of the Jews, the ultimate authority he's going to hold is over all the nations. It says that God one day is going to give him all of the ends of the earth as his personal property. He's going to have authority over everything. Just think, ultimate authority. It's going to be important for this passage that we're going to read today. Ultimate authority. Now, I want to talk about rights. Rights is something we hold very dear in America. We've from the very beginning of America and the founding of America, the rights of human beings we've taken very seriously. We say that they are God-given, right? We speak of like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property. Like these are America's founding fathers and the American project going forward would say that these things are God-given and no human being should be able to like take these things from someone else, right? I have a God-given right to life, to liberty, to pursuit of happiness, right? I get to point the direction of my life in the direction I want to go. My property is protected, and we have laws that protect all these things. And so when we think about rights, this is something that we would say that America recognizes that we're supposed to have sovereignty over. I'm supposed to have sovereignty over my rights, right? They're given to me, God given me. My life belongs to me. My liberty belongs to me. And this is what everybody would agree. Like this is very much like how we think of the rights in America. Each individual has rights and they're sovereign. They're king over their own life. Well, what about Jesus? Jesus, here, the prophets are saying that he is this son of David, this one that God is going to give all the property to. The ends of the earth are his property. Everything belongs to him. It's all his. And it isn't like it became his at some point, because they're going to reveal him as this word that was with God and was God, as we got quoted this morning from the children, right? He's going to be revealed as this one who's always owned everything. He's always been the king. Even our Sunday school lesson today is this Davidic psalm where he's recognizing God as the ultimate king over everything, right? This is how they always understood God. And so Jesus is coming on the scene, and it's this authority that he's going to receive. He has ultimate sovereignty over his own life, say liberty, pursuit of happiness, property, whatever. And in fact, he has ultimate rights over everything, because everything is his. All the ends of the earth, all the nations. And when we think of, let's just take one of those, life. Fundamental right to life. Who has more of a right to life? Us, right? Who Scripture says the wages of sin is death. The soul that sins shall die. Do we have a right to our own life in one certain sense, right? We've all sinned, right? If we were to get the wages of what we've asked for in our actions, then we don't deserve life. We're not worthy of life. We don't get to possess life. Yet Jesus who is this king that has ultimate authority, does he have the right of life over his own life? I would say that infinitely more so. Why? He's never sinned, right? He doesn't deserve death at any level. He's never sinned. He has the ultimate right to life. Not only that, he is the king over all the earth, all authority in Israel, over Rome, over all the nations. He has this right. And yet, what does he say bringing kingdom life into this world looks like? What does he say it looks like? Go to 16, verse 21. This is when Jesus says, from that time he begins to teach the disciples. 16:21 says, from that time on, this is after this idea of Messiah has been revealed. It says he began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders and the chief priests and the experts in the law and be killed. And just imagine, like, if you're the apostles, like, I understand why Peter's like, Jesus, far be it from you, like, absolutely not. Don't you realize, like, this confession I just made that you said is right, that you are the Messiah, like, and sometimes we throw around this word like Christ, Messiah, and we think of it like in religious terms. Man, he's thinking of it like, you are the king. You're the rightful heir of the throne. You have all authority. And he knows the prophecies, right? All the ends of the earth are going to come and gather and worship you. They're going to bow down, and you have ultimate authority. And so when he hears, like, let me tell you what that means. And he says, I'm going to lay down my right to life. Why? And we know why, right? He's going to do it for the sake of people, right? If he has the ultimate authority over all people on the earth, then what does he want to do? What does he want to do? We know what the new covenant is. He wants to change their hearts, right? He doesn't want to rule with this iron rod like Psalm 2 actually talks about. He doesn't want to go take authority and rule and make you take the knee. This isn't how he operates. He's saying, no, that isn't how God is. God doesn't want to make you take the knee. Like, he wants to show you who he is. And he's going to do it by laying down his ultimate fundamental right, which is why we look at the crucifixion as the ultimate sign of love, the ultimate sign of who God is and all of these things. He's going to lay down that. And what does he ask his followers to do? We talked about this last week and a little bit the week before. Look at verse 24. And then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wants to become my follower. And you can read like the Old Testament stories about the kings of Israel, and they had their crew, right? They had their warriors and their crew and their posse, if you will. Like, they had their people that followed them wherever they went and did their bidding and were their loyal followers, their loyal people. They were their inside men. And he's saying, if you want to come follow me, if you want to follow me, the Messiah, this is Jesus, not me, Jesus, if you want to follow me, he says, if you want to be my disciple, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And so he's going to say, like, to follow me looks just like my life, right? Like, I'm going a certain direction, and come take up your own cross, deny yourself, and come. And as we learn what that cross looks like, then he's going to ask us to put that principle into place in our life. This is how we do. And the same thing. So he's asking us the same thing. Whoever wants to save his life. Right, if I say, I have the right to life and I'm going to fight to preserve my life, I want to save my life, he says, if you do that, you're going to lose your life. Because this actually doesn't bring the kingdom into being in your life. Like, this is what brings death and destruction into the world, is when we live that. And he's saying, man, the real way to life, ultimate life, the way he'll talk in John as abundant life, is to come follow him and lay down your right to life. And he does it first, right? He does it first, and then he asks us. Go to our first passage today, chapter 17, verse 22, and he's going to, if you have little headings over your little Bible passages, like most new Bibles have little headings in the Bible and written in the Bible passages, mine says, the second prediction of Jesus' death and resurrection. Because in this section, he's going to, over and over, keep reminding the apostles, hey, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, and they're going to take me and torture me and kill me. Over and over. He does not want them to forget this. And so that's what another one of these is. He says, when they gathered together in Galilee, Jesus told them, the Son of Man, did I tell you the verse? 17, verse 22. He told them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And on the third day, he will be raised. And we can see that this is not resonating with them at all. Read the next sentence. This is not resonating. This is very worrisome. Like, you're supposed to be the king, Jesus. And there's a reason why they were, like, so distraught when they watch him die on the cross. Is because, like, it feels like the whole project of taking back the kingdom of Israel for God, it failed. And so what is their response? It says they became greatly distressed. Greatly distressed. But this is the teaching he wants to keep teaching them. I'm going to lay down my life. And in John, he wants to make it really clear. He says, they don't take it from me. I lay it down. Like, I have authority over my own life. This isn't something they're going to take from him. He's going to allow it for the sake of this mission that's bigger than him. When we think of the other rights, let's say property, liberty, right, pursuit of happiness, whatever, like these rights that we talk about in the American Project, we talk about as these God-given rights. The next story is going to be dealing not with life, but maybe property, maybe liberty. And if you'll look there, verse 24, we're going to read it. And we have to remember as we go through this, he is the king. He has authority, all authority. It says, after they arrived in Capernaum, verse 24, after they arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and said, "Your teacher pays the double drachma tax, doesn't he?" And he said, "Yes." And when Peter came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first. "What do you think, Simon? From whom do earthly kings collect tolls and taxes? From their sons or from foreigners?" After, he said, "From foreigners." And Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free." And by the way, the teaching he's saying here is essentially to Peter, we don't owe this tax. We don't owe it. Okay, this is what he's saying. I don't owe it. Like he has not only just the right over as a king, but just in this scenario, like here's these people that want my property. I don't owe them this property. And what does he say? Then the sons are free. Verse 27, he says, "But so that we don't offend them, go to the lake and throw out a hook. Take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you'll find a 4 drachma coin. Take that and give it to them for me and you." And what stands out to me is, here's this, once again, he has this right to life, and he's willing to lay it down. And now they're coming demanding property, right? They have no authority to. He says, we have the right over our authority, or over our property here. They cannot take it. It doesn't belong to them. But what does he do? He doesn't fight them. He says, so that we don't offend them. And we see, once again, where is his heart? What is the purpose behind it? Is it just so that he can get taken advantage of? He's just going to allow them to take advantage of? No, it's for them. It's because he cares about these people. And as we read later in Matthew, especially Matthew 23, we'll just see the heart of Jesus toward these people that have the religious authorities that are his major opponents. And yet he cares about them. He wants to reach them. And so he's going to do what? He's going to give up his right to whatever, property here, maybe liberty. Like he lays this down. His instruction is, man, if you want to be a part of what I'm doing, we've talked about this a lot, if you want to be a part of what I'm doing, which is the people are what's important. He wants to gather the people. He wants to save the people. And how does that happen? How does it happen? And it happens through denying of yourself, taking up your cross. And in every context, it's going to look different, right? In my world, it's going to look different than someone living overseas, than someone living in the 16th century or 12th century. Like, it always looks different. But this is what he's teaching here. It's like, man, if I can win this one, or I can start to change his heart, or plant this seed, it's worth it. It's worth it to give up my rights. Let's look at an example. I want to look at an example. Go with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Paul is one of these followers of Jesus who lived this out in an incredible way. And some of his letters just reveal him dealing with this issue with his own followers. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 6. When any of you has a legal dispute with another, does he dare go to court before the unrighteous rather than before the saints? And so just for the context, this is what's best assumed, best understood here, is that here are two people in the church. One did something to the other or harmed the other, maybe monetarily or in some way that you would ask, maybe you'd ask for your property back, or you would ask for reconciliation or restitution, and if they refuse, then you might sue them, right? You might go to court. That's the way that we handle it in our world. Like if someone damaged your property and you want to get it back and they won't give it back, then you go to court, you put your facts before a judge, and the judge decides. Here, it's two people in the church, and they're fighting each other in court, and not just, and instead of fighting each other within the church, they're going outside to the court in the Gentiles, right? The court of the non-believers, to fight for what's theirs. And he says, how dare you go to court before the unrighteous rather than the saints? Verse 2, he says, or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? So he's saying if you're going to go to court with anybody, you should at least let the people in the church handle it. Like, let's come together and get the elders of the church and let's come to a solution, right, if there's problems within the church. He says, don't you realize the saints will judge the world, right? This is the rulership of the ages going, in the future. And if the world is to be judged by you, and you do not, he says, and if the world is to be judged by you, are you not competent to settle trivial suits? Do you not know that we will judge the angels? Don't know what that means? Do you not know we will judge the angels? Why not ordinary matters, right? We're gonna judge in these great things one day, right? According to the kingdom, this kingdom of God world, and this fits. Like, there's gonna be different authority levels in the restored heavens and earth. Jesus says the 12 apostles are gonna sit on 12 thrones over the tribes of Israel. Right? So there's going to be some level of authority. I usually like to think of it as who gets authority in the kingdom are those that learn how to operate with kingdom authority here. Because what does the kingdom authority look like? Taking up your cross and denying yourself and serving humanity and giving of yourself and allowing yourself to be abused for the sake of loving others. Like, the ones that learn how to do that well, the martyrs, if you will, like those that learn how to do that really well, Jesus will say, you can be a ruler in my kingdom because I've watched you do it. You've learned how to do it. And he's like, don't you realize, we're going to be these ones judging these great matters, right, with the angels. And this might just be hyperbole, maybe. I don't know. But he's like, we're going to be judging the angels. How much more can you not handle this small matter in your daily life? He says, so if not, verse 4, so if you have ordinary lawsuits, do you appoint as judges those who have no standing in the church? He says, I say this to your shame. Is there no one among you wise enough to settle disputes between fellow Christians? Instead, does a Christian sue a Christian and do this before unbelievers? He says, the fact that you have lawsuits among yourselves demonstrates that you've already been defeated, though. So the whole point of, and we're about to get to the whole point of this section. This whole section is not like, hey, if you got a dispute with your brother or sister in the church, then go within the church and get it fixed. He's saying, no, if you already have this dispute, you've already been defeated. Why? Because if you have a dispute over your property with someone in the church, you're already fighting for your stuff instead of caring about the other person as more important than your stuff, right? And so he's about to get into that and say, it's not even about that. Look at the next verse. It says, verse 7, the fact that you have lawsuits already demonstrates that you have already been defeated. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? You see what Paul really is concerned about? He's like, you got a guy in the church suing you, and maybe you're suing him. I don't know exactly what this story going on, but they're fighting over property maybe, and they're suing each other, and he's like, the fact that you're going to unbelievers is just stupid. That's just horrible. Can't you handle it in the church? But then he says, but really, the real problem here is the fact that y'all even have this dispute. The fact that there's this dispute means that y'all have already lost the battle. You've already lost. You're already representing let's say this, the kingdom of hell, the kingdom of Satan. You're already bringing that kingdom and its works into the church. You're already doing that. He says it would be better to be wronged and better to be cheated. And what he's getting at here is the other person and their heart is more valuable than any property. Anything that they could take from you or sue you for or whatever. Let them have, I can just imagine Paul in my lingo being like, let them have the stupid property. Let them have the money. Who cares about that? The person is what matters. This is what matters. And that's what I think Jesus is doing in this story. He's like, look, so that we don't offend them. He's going to provide in this miraculous way, and maybe that's to continue showing his glory in the midst of the apostles, but go give them what they think is owed to them. Let them have it. Go give it to them. He says, verse 8, but instead, you yourselves wrong and cheat, and you do this to your brothers and sisters, meaning fellow Christians. And it's funny, people quote this next verse. People quote this next verse to point out all these like really bad things that are in the world, like, oh, these people are all going to not inherit the kingdom of heaven and whatever. Do you realize like what he's following this next verse with? This story about not giving up your property instead of being cheated or abused or wronged, right, with your property. He goes on to say, do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, right? And then this is where it goes on, the sexually immoral and the idolaters and the adulterers and the, my translation, passive homosexual partners and practicing homosexuals and thieves and greedy and drunkards and verbal, but what does he follow in this with? This story on these two Christians suing each other over stuff. And he's like, you've already lost. You're already representing unrighteousness. Isn't it better just to be wronged? Isn't it better to be cheated? Isn't it better to give up our rights for the sake of winning that one that wants to take our rights? To show them love sacrificially and not gritting our teeth, but out of love. Like we love them and we want their heart changed. And we might not change their heart. There's a whole bunch of people that were participated in Jesus' death that their hearts weren't changed. But some were, right? And it was worth it. He said, man, it was worth it to give up his life to save some. The next one is, go to chapter 9. This is a big theme in Corinthians. This is Paul kind of pointing at his own life and how he does it, instead of telling other people, how they should handle it. Chapter 9, 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Am I not free? Just think about that in this idea of like freedom, right? Freedom and rights. Like, am I not free? Paul says. Am I not an apostle, right? One with authority, ultimate authority in the church, the apostles. Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are you not my work in the Lord? If I'm not an apostle to others, at least I am to you, for you are the confirming sign of my apostleship in the Lord. This is my defense to those who examine me. Do we not have the right to financial support? And so this is something he's talking about, his right, something that he has the right to, right? As an apostle, as an authority, as one that has authority, one that's free, says, do we not have the right to financial support? Do we not have the right to the company of a believing wife, like the other apostles and the Lord's brothers and Cephas or Cephas? Or do only Barnabas and I lack the right not to work? Whoever serves in the army at his own expense, who plants a vineyard and does not eat of its fruit, who tends a flock and does not consume its milk? Am I saying these things only on the basis of common sense? And he's like, am I only appealing to common sense here? Or does the law not say this as well? And then he points to scriptural support, right? He says, it's written in the law of Moses, do not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, right? While it's working and crushing the grain, don't muzzle it, let it eat when it wants to eat, right? Eat from the work that it's doing. And so he's using that to justify this principle, this right that he has. He says, God is not concerned here about oxen, is he? Or is he not surely speaking for our benefit? It was written for us, because the one plowing and threshing ought to work in hope of enjoying the harvest. If we sowed spiritual blessings among you, is it too much to reap material blessings or material things from you? If others received this right from you, meaning they've tithed to other apostles maybe that are traveling through, if others received this right from you, are we not more deserving? Like Paul's the apostle that planted this church. Like he's like, I'm the ultimate apostle for y'all. He says this, but we have not made use of this right. He's had the right to it, and he says, I have not made use of my right. He had the authority to ask for it, the authority to demand it if he wanted to demand it. He says, we have not made use of this right. Instead, we endure everything so that we may not be a hindrance to the gospel of Christ. What is it about? He has endured this and not fought for his right or even asked for it. so that he may not be a hindrance to someone regarding the gospel. For the sake of the people, he loves the people. He wants their hearts changed. He wants them transformed into a new kind of human. And he says, we've not made use of our rights. Don't you know that those who serve in the temple eat food from the temple? Excuse me. And those who serve at the altar receive a part of the offering? In the same way, the Lord commanded those who proclaim the gospel to receive their living by the gospel. But I have not made use of any of these rights. Once again, he's like, I have not stood up for my rights. Just for the sake of time, look down at verse 18. He goes on about some of the same stuff. What then is my reward? What then is my reward? It's that when I preach the gospel, I may offer the gospel free of charge, and so not make full use of my rights in the gospel. We'll read a couple more verses just because we kind of see how he applies this principle in his ministry. It says, For since I am free from all, like he has authority, no one's over him, no one can tell him what to do. He doesn't have to take advice or listen to anyone. Like he's like, I'm free. Like he is the apostle of Jesus Christ. He has no authority over him except Jesus. Like there is no higher authority, let's say in the church age, right? There's no authority higher than these apostles. He says, since I am free from all, I can make myself a slave to all. And he says, I have all of this rights, all of this freedom, and I lay it all down. And we'll see why. He lays it all down. And he goes on to just give some examples in order to gain even more people. I become a slave to all in order to gain even more people. To the Jews, I became like a Jew. Or, around this group, I do things so that I don't offend them. Around this group, I do things so I don't offend them. Is kind of what he's saying. He says, to the Jews I became like a Jew to gain the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, to gain those under the law. To those free from the law I became like one free from the law, though I am not free from God's law, but under the law of Christ. So he's saying, I'm still submitted to Jesus' law always. And he says, to gain those free from the law. To the weak I became weak in order to gain the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all means I may save some. And we just see, he says, I have authority, and yet I'm going to, in every scenario, I'm going to do and be in a way that doesn't offend, so that I'm going to lay down my rights, and so that I can maybe save some, so that I can plant these seeds and water these seeds and bring people in. And he's not saying that we don't have these rights. Like we do. Like as Americans, we have to think about this. Like I'm not saying we don't have these rights. We do. Like these are God-given rights. Just in our context, life, liberty, property, whatever. Like we have the right. This is our stuff. God has given us sovereignty over it. And yet, Jesus in the gospel wants to invite us into being the kind of people that are willing to lay down our right for the sake of others, right? He says, one died for all, so that those who live would no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and rose again, but for his sake, for Jesus' sake. And Jesus' sake, we learn from the Gospels that he lived for others. And so the whole mission of being, and for Paul, it's like, man, in order to gain some, in order to bring the love of God into the world, right? We take up our cross, deny ourselves. And so this isn't like, I don't want this to come across as like God wants us to lose our rights or wants to take away our rights or anything like that. And even Jesus, he says, man, I lay down my life. I lay it down. Jesus says, I could call, these legions of angels in this moment to protect me, and they would come. That means they would come. God's not withholding, life from Jesus. The Father wasn't withholding life from Jesus, saying, nope, this is what you got to do, sorry. Jesus had every decision. He could choose to call those legions of angels and to demolish the enemy. He could have done that. But he didn't do that because he was choosing with sovereignty over his person, choosing the sake of loving the other person and loving the enemy over his own self and over his own rights. over, in the story today, over his own property. And what I love the most about this, I've talked about it before in many different preaching contexts, maybe with y'all, is, the image of like two different kinds of kings. And I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen Braveheart. It was a movie I watched a long time ago. And one of the big battle scenes where you have the King of England there, and then you have William Wallace, right, fighting for the rebel side, the side fighting for their rights and their liberties and stuff. And you just see the two different kinds of hearts of a good king versus a bad king. And where's the King of England? He's behind his troops. His troops are out in front of them. He's sending them into battle. He's sending them in saying, go, and he's fighting from a place of protection. And where's William Wallace? He's the first one into battle. He's running he's like, they'll kill me first. I'm going to fight for you first, right? And they follow him in. And you see this kind of picture. Now, I'm not endorsing war and fighting or any of that stuff with this image, this analogy. But what I am endorsing is this idea of a good king. Jesus is this king. Jesus is this ultimate king, ultimate sovereign. And William Wallace represents that in the analogy where he's going in front of his warriors, of his friends and his, all of the people fighting with him. He goes first. And Jesus, the good king, does the same thing. Jesus, he's inviting us to take up our cross. He's inviting us to lay down our rights. He's inviting us to love our enemy and be harmed by people and turn the other cheek and give them our shirt if they sue us for our jacket or whatever. Like, he's inviting us in that kind of life. But he's not standing back from a place of protection saying, this is how you do it, guys, go do it. He goes into it first, right? On the cross, he goes in first, and he lays down his life. He loves the enemy in the midst of it, forgives the enemy. And then he says, this is it. He's trying to change his followers into being like him, and he goes first into the battle. And what we see is it's a different kind of battle, right? It's a different kind of battle than everyone thought the king of David should wage, right? He wasn't going to go and kill the enemy. He was going to go and let the enemy take everything from him and mock him and abuse him, and he was going to love him in return, forgive him in return, because this is where the real enemy is that voice that tells us we need to fight for ourselves, we need to fight for our own blank, fight for our own, just fill in the blank, right? No, the way we bring life into the world is through serving and through loving our enemy and giving of ourselves, which is why communion is so important. Today we're going to do communion. If I can get some ushers to help hand out, we need six, I believe. But communion is this time where we get to declare to one another and that we're going to take on this Jesus thing. He says the cup of blessing that we bless, is it not a sharing in the blood of Christ? It's a participation with Jesus. It's us saying we're going to participate with Jesus in taking on this way of life. So we'll go ahead and hand out the elements.